This is the National Balloon Museum, and we are on celebrating ballooning pioneers with many pioneers today. This is August 3rd, 2009, and we're going to introduce all the people who are going to participate.
I'm Jeannie Reinhard from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Do you need
That's
anything
all.
else?
No, that's it.
I'm Mary Lou Wood from Denver, Colorado.
Carl Steffen from Fort Collins, Colorado.
Stephanie Alley from Islesford, Maine.
And Becky Wiglin from Indianola.
I'm Marlene Winker from Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
And Jim Winker from Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Dewey Reinhardt from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Lucy Steffen from Fort Collins, Colorado.
Joe Wood from Denver, Colorado.
Be discussing a lot of good stories about the beginning of ballooning. Now, I thought maybe since all of you have, at one time or other have been to the Nationals, and it's changed over the years, and some of the early things, like some of the early facilities, we heard some of that yesterday. I think we need to, I would like to get on some of that, like we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have GPSs, we didn't have air conditioning back there anyway. But what are some of your thoughts and memories of the early Nationals?
Heat.
Heat,
Yeah. We talked to one of our children this morning on the telephone and told him how lovely the weather was, and he asked us if we were certain we were in Indianola. So you remember.
Well, you were talking about the lack of air conditioning. What were some of the things about that you obviously remember? You were talking about.
Well, yes, we stayed in the dorms, as everyone else did, I think, except a favored few. But we're from Colorado Springs. We had no idea how hot it could be. No one even told us to bring a fan. And so we had these little dorm rooms with bunks filled with us and our kids and all their friends, and sharing the men's and women's bathrooms. As I recall, the women's was on one floor and the men's was on another. Is that right? But they changed the signs around so often we weren't ever sure which was which. And I don't know. As a matter of fact, that's the first time I ever met Lucy, was in one of the ladies' rooms at Simpson College. She was in there with Barb Sackett, tidying up after spending the night in the tree.
And that's another. I want to hear about that story. Lucy, do you want to talk about the tree?
Well, I don't think it was really up in the tree. It was probably close to the tree and sitting back. But I think a lot of the people that worked with Balloon Works slept in sleeping bags on the field because we just had sort of a big tent where we were showing off the wares from Balloon Works. And we slept in sleeping bags on the field. I was probably leaning up against the tree, but I don't know. But we certainly did use the facilities in the dorms. We certainly were in need of them. But I remember I had a long leather skirt that I wore.
Yes.
I was sort of a hippie back in those days.
And a leather cap that Tracy had made. Everyone that worked for him a leather cap to wear. Match the leather on the trim on the balloons.
Oh, I see.
So they all had leather caps and skirts.
What was the year? Do you remember? Julie, what year was that? You bought your book?
74, 75.
Yeah.
Wasn't it, Jane?
I have no idea. I don't know.
But
So,
No, I
what
think it
about what was the
before
setup
then.
with the? I remember the Barnes Balloon tents wrapped around the water tower and everything. You had a great big zigzag
yeah.
wrap around.
and then, just sort of brochures and, baskets set out. And I think we actually had some of the people working on baskets to demonstrate how they were made. Bonnie, were you there making baskets at Indianola at all?
I don't remember doing it there. I remember doing it in Statesville.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had, the Balloon Works first had a freestanding tent made out of
Yeah, just,
balloon fabric, and they had all their sewing machines. They brought most of their staff up, as I recall. They were
yeah.
actually building balloons out here on the field. And right across the way from them, Don Picard had an inflatable building where his wares were on display. But the thing around the tower was like second generation. That was a couple of years after you guys first brought the whole operation up here.
Uh-huh.
'Cause I bought
But-
my first balloon in that
First
tent.
tent,
Yeah,
yeah.
tell the story about that,
The balloon?
about being in line.
And, oh,
Oh, the story
Fire your
Lucy
balloon.
told last night.
The one you
yesterday.
told last night.
uh,
Well, the Dewey
well, I was standing and I'd had a Raven, sorry, Jim. I had an S-55A and it was, and basically we taught, I was gonna talk about how we taught ourselves to fly, because there were I had an instructor, but he didn't know much more about it than I did, but, so I was getting so beat up in the landings that my kids bought a set of pads for me for my knees, and, I broke my kneecap, and I kept getting beat up on the fuel tanks, and I was in the Barnes tent, and this guy was standing next to me, and I noticed the fuel tanks were tucked away in the corner and looked like something I really could use. And he mentioned that the wicker was vertically woven, so you wouldn't get, if you're going through a fence or something, you wouldn't tend to get hung up quite so bad as you did with the horizontal aluminum bars that we had on our baskets. And I said, you know much about these? And he said, well, I own 6 of them. And I said, what do you think? And he said, well, good balloons, I wouldn't own 6. And I said, well, I appreciate that. I'm new to ballooning. My name is Dewey Reinhardt. And he said, nice to know you, Dewey. I'm Malcolm Forbes. I still didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
One of the stories Dewey used to tell about learning how to fly was one time when he took off from the Springs, I believe he was solo, and he made it almost to Denver. And the chase crew finally, when they showed up, he hit a tree or among other things, and one of the chase crew looked at him and says, "Oh, you wear boxer shorts, huh?" His pants had come off.
Oh, no.
It was hard to hit.
Well, one of the things that's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, is because now, you know, everything is so regimented and you have to have so many hours in this, and talk about the time, you know, when there were no rules, and, you know, like Lucy said, she just signed on a piece of paper and she got her pilot's license. You know, those are the kind of things people need to know, because that's not one of those things that, you know, they think, oh, that's it.
When I was training back in 75 or 6, probably 6, Don Bars flying the Raven Can balloon called Black Magic 55A. And there's a little airport outside of Denver called Van Air, where a bunch of people that had planes lived, and they would take off from their front yards and fly around. And one guy had taken off and come up short and tipped it over, and the plane was just upside down. So we're flying along there in the balloon, and Don says, "I've never seen a balloon upside, or a plane upside down. I'd like to stop and let's go look at it." So we landed, and he jumped out, and I'm just standing there, and all of a sudden, here comes a car across this field just barreling down on us. And I said, "Don, I think the farmer's coming, or at least the owner of the plane. We're in trouble." And these 2 guys run up, they stop, they jump up, and they run up to the balloon, and they say, "We're from the NTSB, and we have a balloon license, and this is the first one we've ever seen."
what does NTSP stand for?
The National Transportation Safety Board, that they were investigating the accident.
Oh, I see, okay.
Okay.
Uh,
And
And they had one
they're
in,
part of the FAA,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, they were.
And so did you let them get in?
No,
Nope.
we left them. Heck with them.
Lucy, how about getting your license?
Well, yeah, it was very, very early. Carl remember the date better than I, and I went to the FAA and they didn't know, have any questions to ask me. I had a private pilot's license. They had me just sign my name and I had a balloon license, just like that.
All
They
right.
didn't know anything
Well,
about
they
it.
knew how good you were.
Yeah, apparently. That's it. And,
Yeah, the same experience, just
You want-
no questions and.
no questions or anything, you know, they said, we don't really know what to ask you. So there,
Huh?
that was before anybody was flying balloons in.
And all licenses, balloon licenses were just lighter than air free balloon.
Yeah, lighter
Really,
than air for
gas
balloon,
balloon
yeah.
license,
You
you
have-
could fly gas. balloon.
Well, it
What
was
year?
generic. I mean, there wasn't any distinction at that time.
Yeah,
I
how
got mine
far
in
back
1960.
was that?
I got mine in 1962, I think.
Did you have to take an exam?
Oh, no.
No. No, see,
Were you
we're
a
all
fixed
like
wing
that,
pilot?
we're all.
Oh, you weren't?
Had nothing.
Oh, you didn't have to have a pilot's license at all?
No.
And so, and then was it didn't matter if it didn't matter if it was gas or hot air or
They didn't know the
commercial or
difference.
private? Oh, okay.
Never heard of a hot air balloon, but
Oh, yeah.
that came much later.
It's too bad it
So-
changed.
When did they change the laws?
When did they change the laws or make laws?
I don't know,
I don't
we
know.
had to take a written in 74, I had a fixed wing and glider license, but I still had to take the balloon written, and, but they wouldn't have left we'd heard 2 FAA check ride examiners in Colorado, so they wouldn't let them ride with us.
They just watch you from the ground?
Yeah, they did. She rode with Jeannie in the pickup, and her name was Marilyn Sidwell. She was a Learjet check pilot, didn't know anything about balloons. And she said, I'm not allowed to ride with you, but I'm gonna ride with Jeannie in the truck. If you don't have a reportable accident, I'll give you your license.
And if she had more than one person, she'd say, okay, I want you to fly across into that next field, and I want you to fly to that field, and I want you to fly to that field. Okay, yeah, we'll work it out.
Well, I'm glad she didn't see my landing. I landed, it was another one of my bone jarring experiences. The wind picked up and I had a horrible landing and the balloon laid down. I was still kissing the ground and I looked out the other end of the balloon. Here's a Cessna 150 parked at the other end of the balloon. The guy came walking down and I said, my gosh, I didn't see you out here. I wouldn't have landed this close to you. Not that I could pick them out where I'm going to land very well, but I wouldn't have landed this close to you. He said, you didn't land close to me. I saw you land. I thought you killed yourself. I landed out here and checked on you.
Oh. So, what were, like when you were really flying by the seat of your pants in more ways than one, then,
Or lack of.
or like, yeah. All right, yeah. Yeah, it always comes back to that, yes, all right. What were some of the changes that from the beginning, I mean, there was like nothing here. And then what were some of the changes that causes other changes that cause, everything has to, things like that. Jim, with you in the beginning, you probably saw the most changes.
Somehow they just didn't register because we weren't watching changes very well.
Oh, you were just living them.
Right.
So like when you were in with Ed Yost and Richard Quasar and those guys
Right.
On that. You want to talk a little bit about that? What was your job at Bruning?
Well, I was the engineering manager, so I had an involvement from a desk in the plant. but, and they were the people that got to go out and fly every day they could. So I didn't have the same background that they did, but I did get out and I did get to fly and I did pick up a license and so forth. The guys that had the real gut-wrenching experiences aren't here anymore.
Mm. Did you, they always said that Mr. Quasar was like number 2, and then like that probably that Ed was 1 and he was 2 and you were probably 3 as far
Well,
as the number of getting them.
There has to be a little clarification on that, because there was no such thing as a hot air balloon pilot license.
Right.
It was just, you were one more in the series of balloon licenses. As I said, there were no distinctions at that time. That came later. So Ed was probably the first one that got a balloon license after the hot air balloon was invented, and Quasar may well have been second, but their certificate did not read any different.
No.
Anybody else looking at it would just say, oh, here's another balloonist.
Yeah. When did they start putting, like the N numbers on it? Was that from the very beginning, or was that, was there a reason that later it came? I don't know.
Well, that comes with type certification.
Just because it was like
The first half,
aviation.
the first half dozen balloons had nothing on them because we didn't know what we were doing yet.
Oh.
As soon as the FAA got aware, then we had to have an experimental license. And then after we got type certification, of course, then it became N numbers.
And then when we got our balloon, the N numbers were like this big, and now they're like this big.
Yeah, there was a rule, I think they had to be a foot high, and the balloon manufacturers petitioned the FAA to get down to something small, and so that the public can't see it.
That's right. So the farmers
You're
weren't
gonna
on,
tell all
right?
the secrets.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was the FAA petitioned or somebody petitioned the FAA to get that done, but that was a lot.
So what do you guys do, teach each other? Did Dick teach you to fly, or they just tell you what to do? Or?
Well, I guess I observed what they did, and of course, the engineering background helped. I knew what to expect, more or less. And we did, there were probably 2 or 3 tether rides, so you could get the feel of the burn and so forth. And when our kids made this hot air balloon for a science fair project, I was the first one to fly in it. But Terry Wright helped me with the tether ride, first of all, so he was giving me a little experience. And then I got in the balloon and flew away and lived.
All right. So were you guys flying when we started flying, we didn't know any better. We flew, this kid was my instructor, was a cadet at the Air Force Academy. So as soon as he got out of class, he came over to our house. We inflated the balloon and we were taking a lot of crush from our house. And it was usually between 1 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is why I never had a stand-up landing for several months.
So when did you decide that wasn't a good time? Like maybe earlier or later?
Well, we had a seminar, I think it was back here somewhere, the first, Bruce Comstock and David Schaefer and all those guys are highly competitive. They gave some technical seminars back here that I found were interesting.
And I think it was a year or 2 earlier than that when in Indianola, they were flying any time of the day or night that they could get off the ground.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the fellow from California. He got into an afternoon thermal, and he really went up, and he felt he was likely to get back down again. That was a discovery that you don't fly in the afternoons.
Yeah.
Early
Really? I didn't know that. That's good.
And out in Colorado, people were afraid to go to the mountains because the too many wind currents. They didn't know what to expect, and we never flew in the mountains it started right after I started, probably in the 77, 78, we started going up to Aspen and flying out of places. But it was something that was kind of verboten. And now, we just flew in that little valley in Snowmass, and now they have a down valley race that goes 40, 50 miles down towards Glenwood Springs. So it's really mountain flying
is it
has
still
changed radically.
Only in the morning though? Is it in the morning?
No, they do have some afternoon
Oh, they do.
flights. Yeah, they can fly.
Not me.
Yeah, there's a few people, I had one episode in Walla Walla, Washington, that, when I was flying a 9, I was flying that, a Raven 10 with the second serial number on it, and, a balloon came down behind me and passed me. And I knew there was something wrong when he went by. And, I got caught in a thermal, I got caught in the downside of it, was heading for power lines, and there was 50 cars parked along underneath the power line tubes, you know, they were there, somebody had told them stay near the power lines, you'd be safer, because they won't hit a power line. So, that was, an afternoon flight, and I quit them after that.
Did you hit them all?
I didn't hit any of them.
Good for you.
I wanna hear from the ladies, and when these guys when you're in the truck or whatever you drive, and you're watching them bounce along on the ground or in the air, what were some of your thoughts? And since, and daughters too, and cause you grew up with this. Marlene, what did you think when he first started this, what did you think?
I don't know.
Talking about landings, I probably wasn't thinking, no, probably figured you knew what he was doing.
He was doing. Because he'd been in it for so long, I suppose it was just part of his job, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah. She felt that way.
I was gonna say, I think Jeannie ought to really give her viewpoint on Dewey learning how to fly, and how many times Jeannie didn't fly with him.
Oh. Tell the truth?
Yeah.
And why you stopped flying with him.
Well, my very first flight was with that crazy Jim Greason, who was, as Dewey said, was a cadet. And Don Picard had given the cadets 3 balloons
Yeah, the academy.
at the Air Force Academy. And
Well, tell them about those balloons.
the 3 balloons.
Yeah, where they came from and everything.
Oh, Don Picard owned Picard Balloon Works, but I don't know what he called his company. Anyway, he gave 3 balloons to the Air Force Academy so the cadets could fly them and to further the sport of ballooning, I'm sure. But the cadets couldn't have cared less about how when they flew or how they flew or any damage, because it was a great fun thing for them, and they were on they flew at any time that they didn't have to go to school. So Dewey had this balloon for 2 years?
3 years.
3 years, and it was stored because we had seen them in Palm Springs, inflated, and he came home and told his comptroller, if you ever see a balloon, let's buy one. Well, the next week he had one. And then we didn't have any idea what to do with it. All we knew was this thing is big, and if we took it out of the bag, we would never get it back in. So when we found Jim Greason, we thought he was an expert, and of course he was 18 years old. He was not.
Potential fighter pilot.
Yeah, he's a fighter pilot is what he was, so. Anyway, I don't remember, oh, I know, my first flight. Dewey had flown, once with Jim, maybe? And the next night, we decided to take off in this lot across the street from our house. And as we took off, you could see the moon coming, or the moon setting over here against the mountains. So it was very late, and we flew across town, and the lights were coming on in all the parking lots, and we had probably 50 cars following us. It's the only balloon that's ever been seen in Colorado Springs. And Dewey said, hey Jim, let's land in this parking lot. And he said, oh no, we don't have enough room in there. The fire filling station there, remember, he was flashing his lights off and on us. And so we came to the golf driving range. And Joey said, we're gonna land here. And Jim said, we'll be killed. They're all in the golf balls. We're gonna land here. We cannot go across town on a dark night. So anyway, while they're talking, the balloon cools off.
Oh.
And we hit in the middle of the street. The main street in town. Someone that was chasing us jumped out, stopped the cars. Anyway, we bounced over these tall pine trees into a park, and there we stuck. We lay there. I don't remember what that guy said when he ran out.
Oh, she came out, we had a power line right dead ahead of us, and Jim, I said, we better rip out, we're gonna hit that power line. So we ripped out from about 35 feet, and, well, we went about that deep in the grass, but, I mean, we were literally kissing the ground, and this guy came up and said, that was amazing, I've never seen flying skill like that before.
Well, anyway, that sort of ended my flying career. Fly off.
Well, you should tell them about your next flight in Albuquerque, where we got to be calmed over the city.
Well, I'm really good at shinnying down lines into a tree and hanging on to it.
Who was flying? Oh, you, huh? Oh.
You know, it's fascinating how some people think you can move that thing, maneuver it on anywhere you want it to go. And doesn't happen, obviously. And people say, boy, you did a wonderful job missing that tree and everything, and you just were praying you missed it, that's all.
Well, do you have any good stories about your husband, or do you fly with him?
I didn't fly with him that much, mainly because, you know, Joe was PIC and he was always taking somebody for a ride, you know, come ride in my balloon, little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd always be doing that. And he really needed some stability on the ground. And so I've had a couple of interesting on-the-ground chases for my husband. One was in Salina, Kansas, and he must have been going about 20 knots. Is that it? You were 20, 25. He was really cooking. And I saw these cars following me. And I thought, geez, I better pull over so that they can all pass. So I pulled over, and all the cars pulled over. And they were all following me. And I didn't realize that the whole thing was being broadcast on the radio.
Oh.
You know, and I thought, well, okay, you know, and so I just kept chasing him, and all of a sudden, I pulled up to this field, and I told all the crew were on a trailer on the back of our van, and I just pulled off, and I said, see this field? I said, you go out there and stand, because if he doesn't land here, forget it. He complied. They landed there, and they caught him. It was another safe landing. But it was like, you know, the one reason I learned how to fly, and the only reason, because I never wanted to be PIC, was for the simple reason that I figured if I understood what was going on up there, I'd have a better understanding of what was going on the ground. And I figured I had some control, someplace, which was real difficult because they'd never do what you wanted them to do. And this was
balloons
before
we had no
this was-
radio.
we had no
We had
radios.
no radios.
Yeah, we had no radios, no communication. And the only thing was that you just had this telepathic thing that, boy, I hope this is the place she'll land. Because it looks good from down here. And I've had some other interesting things. I was flying with Joe one time in Crested Butte. And there was a farmer that was beneath us, and we were just kind of sailing along, and all of a sudden, Joe looks at me and he says, "Does that guy have a gun?" And I went, "I don't know." So I looked over, I looked at him and I said, "Yep, he's got a gun." So I sat down on the basket, or I sat down on the tank. I figured maybe he can't see me. And he because I figured, I had red hair at that time.
Oh.
So I figured maybe I was a target. And so I just kind of sat down, and Joe was talking to the guy and, trying to appease him and everything else. And what did he say to you?
I don't remember exactly what he said, but he wasn't mad, it was his wife. She'd inherited this land, and that was her land, and we were interfering on her land. And there was another balloon in the field with us. And I offered him a ride down to the other one because the wind had shifted. I said, "You want a ride?" And he wet up to his hips and, moisture up there, and walking along, and he's moaning and groaning. He's carrying, it wasn't a big caliber, 22 probably. Big enough, And it was, but it was kind of interesting. And turned out she was the one that was upset.
Yeah.
Sent him out.
And then there was another time, I think it was in Crested Butte again, where Joe was coming in for a landing, and he yells down at me, and he says, "See if this guy will let us in." And I says, "Okay." So I get out of the van, and I walk up to the guy, and he's a young guy, and I went to say, "Can that balloon land in your field?" And he pointed a gun at me. And I'm going, "Oh." So I kind of stood away, and I said, "That balloon has really got to come down." I said, "It's out of gas, or it's out of fuel." And so Joe landed anyway. And I thought, "Oh my gosh," and that guy is yelling at me and telling me I have to get the balloon out of there. And he's really angry. And sure enough, his father comes along, whose property it is. And he is so excited to have a balloon land on his property. And he just negated everything that this boy had to say. And everybody was happy as a clam. Joe landed, they were very nice to him. We got the balloon out of there. They were very polite to Joe, but they weren't very polite to me, at least the young man wasn't. And then another time, little Joe landed.
Side story on that one, they were wranglers, they were getting ready to go up in the hills and bring down the cattle for the fall. And so all their employees were there, and this kid was playing
Oh, hot shot.
hot shot with all the employees until his dad showed up, and then he was trying to crawl under the truck.
Oh gosh, another time when Joe was first learning how to fly, in Denver, there's a country club that's called Columbine Country Club, and that happened to be the area that he landed was on the golf course. And, we didn't know that there were red zones in those days, and, nobody put out maps or anything like that, and we figured it was a good place for him to land. So he did, and I was getting pretty good at being there when he landed, so that I could come over and help put down the balloon and everything. So I walked up to the balloon, and I don't know whether they planned on walking the balloon out or what, but I do know that I got up on the side of the basket, and I went to do something to the burner. I guess you were shutting down right there. And so I went to get up on the burner to make sure that everything was off. And Joe said something to me, and I ducked down and I said, "What?" And a golf ball hit the burner. Right there.
Oh, no.
And the guy was aiming for it.
You're kidding.
And
Pretty good golfer.
they were not happy. And so anyway, when I got down, and I think the balloon was down, I went to get the envelope to pack up the balloon. The golfers came up and started yelling at me.
You're kidding.
And I mean to tell you, it was like this chasing is getting tough.
Yeah.
And yet they'd always be really nice to Joe.
Joe, no.
There was a
Yeah.
couple others with
All right,
her.
Carl,
Wait a
Can I
minute.
say
Sure.
something here?
jump right
Well,
in.
right now we're playing, Can You Top This on landings?
Yeah.
And so maybe I can.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know, 20 years ago. I was flying out of Fort Collins with a couple of passengers. We went east, and this nice prairie out there. It was fall, the corn had been cut, and when it came time to land, I picked a corn stubble field where the stalks had been cut down. Nothing possibly could I hurt. And I got on the ground, and here this Jeep come tearing across the field, and when he got close to me, he hollered, "Get that SOB out of here!" And so I said, okay, and I took off, went on, found another landing place, and then I came back to his farmhouse and knocked on the door, and they came to the door. I said, "Well, I'm sorry if I caused any problem. I certainly didn't intend to. What was the problem?" And he said, "Well, I had that field leased out to a company, and there were a number of the employees in foxholes around the field waiting for geese to come in."
And they got a big one.
And so what we did was rename the balloon to the Blue Goose.
Good story, Carl.
Well, that's good. Okay, put your,
So I just have a couple of things from back in the 60s that I remember being in Minneapolis and having the balloon club come over to the house. And it was Tracy Barnes and Kit and Karen Juring were pretty active back then. I also remember Mom taking me to visit the Picards at their house, and John and Jeanette Picard having an island on the same lake that we do.
oh,
So we would visit them at their island, and they would come over to our island. And Jean Picard had a little, I was fairly small then, I was kind of young, and my brothers and sisters were younger. But he had a little mouse that he would hold with 2 fingers. And at first we all thought it was real, because he would run it up his arm and in his sleeve. And it was, it was really, really fun. And it was fun to know
and it
them.
wasn't.
It wasn't real.
Well,
Yeah, no, it wasn't real, but we, for a long
This
time.
was to entertain the children?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And so in one house that we rented on the Bowen House, I can't remember what road that was on, but it was on Humboldt in Minneapolis.
On Emerson.
Well, the Humboldt House first.
Oh, first, yeah.
Yeah, in the
Humboldt,
kitchen
Humboldt.
there, we would get plastic, like dry cleaner bags.
Mhm.
And then also we had some lightweight plastic, and we would get the ironing board out with Mylar, and then we would melt seams to make this plastic balloon, and then we would get stove black, which is, soot. And we would pour that in the balloon and get it all black. And
Make
then a
soot.
vacuum cleaner hook up the vacuum cleaner backwards and inflate it, and then go outside in the sun, then we'd have our little solar balloons.
Wow.
And Tracy Barnes would come over and, we'd kind of play around with that
Wasn't he
in the
shaped like
kitchen for a while.
tetrahedron?
And then when Tracy did an altitude flight in the 60s, was that like?
yeah, we have the exhibit
Uh-huh.
out there in the corner.
Well, at that time, we lived on the Emerson House in Minneapolis. And so after he did his successful flight, they brought the part of the balloon back to the house, and they printed up little cards saying, world record holder, and Mom and Dad thought, well, look, we can help Tracy raise money to pay for his flight. So if you take these to school and sell them for $1 a piece, we can help him out. So that was the first time I ever went to the principal's office. You're not supposed to know, I didn't think anything was wrong with doing that, yeah. So,
The end of your entrepreneurship,
yeah,
Did you sell them?
well, I mean, I think I probably sold a couple.
Okay.
You know,
Before the
word got
principal
around,
found
yeah,
out.
before they found out.
They're now historical
Mhm.
pieces of.
So we, in the early days, it was fun being involved, and then the St. Paul Winter Carnival. And I can remember Dad running across a frozen lake, chasing a balloon that was dragging across the lake, and as he ran, he would peel off his overcoat and then his sweater, and, you know, I said, well, what, you know, why are you doing that? You wanna run faster, or? He said, no, I don't wanna get all sweaty and then get chills, and, you know, so we learned a lot from Dad about safety until, he jumped out of a balloon with a bungee cord.
Oh, no, you did that?
You jumped out of a balloon on a bungee cord.
Oh, yeah, yes. Yeah, well, a couple of guys came to me and they wanted to learn how to fly a balloon and then use it for bungee jumping. And so I taught them how to fly a balloon and got their licenses, and then got into the bungee jumping, and they wanted an engineering approval of their bungee setup. And so I made a couple of jumps out of the balloon just to get the hang of it.
Is this when it was tied to your ankles?
And it is pretty hard to make yourself jump.
Oh dear.
But anyway, I told them we had to come up with some way of measuring the deterioration of the bungee cord. And they said, oh, it's all right, it's good for a couple hundred jumps. And I said, well, you have to measure it each time to be sure you haven't snapped some more cords in there. And so that delayed them coming up with a scheme to measure the stretch of, well, the elasticity of the cord. And in the meantime, somebody was killed jumping off of a bridge. The bungee who was worn out, and they quit the business.
No.
I thought Dad was trying out another experiment because he had, a little while before that, he had had an operation, and I thought he was trying to test his pacemaker to see if that worked. So he didn't know, if we had been there, we all would have skipped a heartbeat.
Well, those White Bear Lake events, they were in the winter time, but I think it was 30 or 40 below sometimes. Most miserable flights I'd ever had.
Now, you were talking yesterday about when you guys all were at Barnes and you got to weave baskets and all. What other kind of wonderful things did you get to do?
Well, cut the fabric, you know, roll it out on the table and do the wires, melt it through the wires, and sew. I did a lot of sewing. I worked a lot of overtime. That at night I would wake up and I'd be waving the sheet like this.
That's a lot of overtime, yeah.
And then, well, there was Dodds Madoc was there at Balloon Works, and I just had sewed the final gore of a balloon together, and so we were pulling it aside to get it kind of all stretched out and organized, and we kept running into trouble, and it turned out I had sewn it around one of the posts.
Oh,
So I had to rip it out and re-sew it again.
That's great.
That's a lot of fabric.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you could do
That
that.
is. I have to ask you, when Tracy was here, he always kept saying, you know, that when he started, he hired a bunch of hippies and he paid them $2 an hour. So, and so when I was down there, I was telling this story, and there's a voice from the back. $2 an hour was 75 cents an hour. He's pulling your leg, and how much were you paid?
Whatever the minimum was.
Whatever. I don't
Yeah.
think it was the minimum. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it was good training for,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, yeah,
Lobstering, cause you don't make a
Yeah.
lot of money lobstering, but you work hard, so.
yeah. Kinda like being a balloon curator. You work hard, you don't make any money either, but,
Did each of you work in there? All three?
I'm not sure about Candy, I think Leslie and Heather probably did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Where
we
is
did.
Leslie,
They did,
by
uh-huh.
the way?
I went
and so,
flying.
do you remember, I was asking when they left, and they don't remember
Oh.
when they left. Do you remember when they left Barnes?
I was still living in Maine, no, I don't remember the year or anything like that.
70s, 80s,
Late seventies probably.
late 70s?
Mhm.
Okay.
Becky, I had a couple of good rides around Statesville in those days. Once I was up with Tracy flying low, over those foothills there,
Mhm.
and we heard some gunshots.
Mm.
And they were the guys making hooch. They thought we were the revenuers.
Oh,
Spying on them.
spying on them.
Yeah, and Tracy said, we better go a little higher.
Yeah.
And they still were, in fact, they might still be making homemade.
Oh, I'm sure they probably are.
Maybe.
When I was there, he took me out to this monument, and you had to, it's like the worst place in the world for a monument. You had to go through behind a gas station, over a parking lot, and then all of a sudden, here's this monument that talks about, Tracy and Bill Meadows making the first flight out of this parking lot. I'm guessing that's where they must have taken off. And the first flight over, I can't remember the name of the county, but, there.
Iredale?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it has the whole write-up of who Tracy is, who Bill Meadows is, and the whole thing. And so, yeah, it was pretty interesting. But, yeah. But and then we went and saw the, Brine Dome, or whatever it is, where the chicken coop and the other
Yeah,
one
Ryan.
were. And there's a lot of history there, and so,
And
Yeah.
Anna Bryan is still alive, is she?
yeah, the lady is. The man died like last year, but anyway.
Rayford died.
So you have to
I'm
go.
gonna
All
take
right,
off.
cut it right now. She has to leave, and then
I'll
we're
see you.
gonna continue.
When I get done.
Could I just digress a little bit? I think the girls need to write a book about chasing, because they have had, Jeannie's chased me all over the world, and she's in Europe, she'd get in a car with a guy she'd never met before and be in that car with him for 2 days and 2 nights. And we had,
Did you marry him?
I'm not going there. But she truthfully had, at the times, life could have been at risk. She got in chasing us in Switzerland. The guy, regular Hood, was supposed to chase us, and her husband got sick, so she recruited this guy named Candido, who was a dope addict. And he had a Jeep. He had the only full-size car in the whole country, I'm sure. It was a Jeep Wagoneer pickup. And that thing had great big lights all over it. And I asked him what he did for a living. He said he's a surfboarder. I said, I didn't know you could make a living surfboarding.
Especially in Switzerland.
So,
That's a little tricky,
he
I
wore
think.
this bright orange flight suit, flashy looking guy. And so we took off, and Jim Spittler was flying with me in the World Championships from the Bern Airport. And we did pretty well in the competition. And on the second flight, Candido, we had a high drop, and we were looking for our marker, and when we hit an electric fence when we landed. It was not a problem. We were flying hydrogen, but and the gas had mixed. I kept forgetting to close the appendix when we were coming down, so we had an explosive mixture. But it was not really a problem. But the Candido came in. Everything was fine. The farmer was headed out, very calm, and Candido came in with all these lights flashing. He had a siren on that thing, and scared the hell out of the cows. Well, the electric fence was down, so the cows escaped. And so Jeannie, she was in a cold sweat, and this farmer came up to me and he had a club and he started chasing me. And I had always carried $300 in my flight suit because we've had that's the magic number when you have to pay to get your balloon out. Worldwide, it's $300. So I whipped that $300 out while I'm running around, and he should have been chasing Candido, but it was, you know, we were doing fine. The cows were not moseyed off or anything, but the anyway, I got the $300 out. I called the and I
Calmed
said,
it
Jimmy,
down.
what is it like, you know, what, riding with Candido? He said, first thing he did was offer me some dope when we got out on the highway. So, and she did that in Europe. It was just, you look back at guys she didn't even know. See, over there, the balloon, we had to pay the expenses of our observers. You had to have an observer with you. And you had to put them up. If they spent the night, you know, if we didn't know where we were gonna go, I'd just tell Jenny to, you know, get a hotel and we'll call them when we land. And it may be 300 or 400 miles away. And so she's, you know, was a person she'd never met before, didn't even speak his language, or couldn't even communicate. And so it was you know, it was a dicey, the flying was dicey, but the chasing, I think, was a lot dicier.
And what year would this have been?
These were, we were serious gas balloonists for about 10 years in the 80s.
80s.
Yeah.
Now, when you have a gas balloon, I always wondered this, you know, like, over there is hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you fill it up, and then you fly, and then, you know, like, when you come down, you just release it and it's, you know, but do they have tanks, and where did it, you know, where do you get it? I mean, do they have
The
tankers
hydrogen?
and? Yeah, the hydrogen, how do they
They,
supply it?
they have trucks, and then, and the first time we ever flew over there was from the Heysel Stadium in Brussels, Belgium. And they actually piped this hydrogen, they wouldn't let the hydrogen trucks inside the stadium. So they piped it like 3 blocks through these great big fabric pipes into the stadium. And so we had like, I don't know, it must have been 20 or 30 gas balloons in there from all countries, all over the world. And we inflated, and the place was like, you know, an NFL football game. They had this great big illuminated like scoreboard. And they had our names all mixed up, like they had Dewey Davis. John Davis was my co-pilot, and they had, I don't know, they had our names all mixed up. And then, but they were having political problems. The Flemish-speaking guy, Albert Van den Benen, who organized the World Championships, perfect gentleman, wonderful guy, could not get along with the French-speaking director of transportation of aeronautics. We got all these balloons and we couldn't get permission to fly. And we kept having these pilot briefings, and of course the language was you know, what you can say in 2 minutes in English, it takes 15 minutes to say in French or Flemish.
I mean, no.
Yeah.
So we had the delay after delay. We said, "With good news, we can fly over the king's castle." And we said, "We didn't even know you had a king. It's not even on the charts or anything." So this was just to keep us happy. Pretty soon they canceled the events, and up on the scoreboard they said, "Pilots refuse to fly." Well, we had a stadium full of people. We thought, you know, we had hydrogen. They started throwing cigarettes at us. And so we had to deflate all those balloons and move to another
And wouldn't that have
place.
been a lot, that's a lot of combustion there.
Oh,
Oh,
gee,
yeah.
it was
I
a
mean-
hazardous deal, and they, you know, they said they just wanted us to valve it off. They didn't want any balloons ripped out because they didn't want that much hydrogen floating around in there. Well, the
Was it a
Americans-
covered stadium or was it open?
No, it was open.
Open?
It was a world stadium for the World's Fair in 1936
Hmm.
in Brussels.
So why didn't they just say that the judges couldn't get their acts together and they blamed it on the pilot? It was easier on the pilot?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Pilots are American, a lot of them.
Oh,
Well, I don't
No,
think that had
that's
anything
not
to do with it, it was just that they were, you know, it's a political problem. It's a two-language country, and the two factions just don't communicate. But anyway, Jeannie, well, getting back to the chase cruise adventures, chasing us in gas balloons and hot air. We had, you know, speaking of gunshots, we had been
In jail.
shot at, and,
yeah.
Joe Kittinger and I were shot at in the first Gordon Bennett that we flew out of from the Queen Mary. We were over Watts,
You took off from the Queen Mary?
from the parking lot there. It was a
Mm.
beautiful flight. Joe was out assisting, and he was a launch crew for Nikki Kaplan from St. Louis, famous female pilot.
Yeah. First lady of Missouri, pilot, yeah.
Was she the one that dipped down into the water?
No.
Not by choice.
No, not by choice.
These guys, I accuse him of sending her off heavy.
Oh.
She went over the end of that dike and kersplashed, and people were throwing M&M candies out of there. They had food floating all over their face.
She ran into a
God.
boat out
Some guy in a
there.
boat wouldn't move out there.
And then when they took off, they were going over Lax, and one of the pilots said, "You people want to be a hood ornament on a 707, or are you gonna get out of our way?"
That was it.
So why, was she too heavy or
Yeah.
what, what's, oh,
They didn't weigh her off right.
You
oh.
didn't wear off.
I wasn't involved.
No, it's always someone else, always someone else.
This is a standing joke between us, but, and Nikki, it was, you know, it was my first flight in, after our transatlantic. I made one gas flight before we tried the Atlantic, which is stupid. But, then I took Joe Kittinger on this flight, because I thought he knew how to fly a gas balloon, and you never want to take a parachutist. How to land a gas balloon. But they shot at us, we heard the Germans fall in and said they were being shot at over Watts. And oh, Joe said, the goddamn Germans are nothing but a bunch of complainers. So we get over Watts, they shot at us and hit us. Joe starts putting on a parachute. He's got a war hero. Why would you want to parachute into someplace where they're shooting at you?
You have to
Because
ask,
they hit the balloon and sounded like a giant.
ask Dewey about his transatlantic attempt. I think that's really historic.
Alright, well, I think we only have 3 more minutes, so we're gonna have to do that on another
You
time.
can do that, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine, but just keep going,
He
and
ended up
I
in
wanna
prison.
know,
Where, in
did-
Hungary?
Pardon?
You ended up in prison in Hungary? Or was
No,
that
that was,
Czechoslovakia?
well, that was in Balf, Hungary. Well, the
Yeah,
army,
Balf.
the army, we didn't end up in prison, the army just picked us up and
Let you go. That's called prison.
so, we've heard, did you ever end up in jail in any of your flights?
Me?
No.
Oh,
No, I'm just checking, cause, you know, did you have any, exciting, chases that you had to chase him out of, or get him out of any problems or anything?
Well, one of the local flights, he went up north of town, which is kinda hilly, and we couldn't find him. Remember that?
No.
I think Todd was probably with us. And it was the north of town, and I don't, they said they saw you, but they didn't know how to get to you.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Yeah. That's the only one I remember.
Yeah, about the worst one, we used to fly here at the Nationals, and the worst one was, that's when we were still at Simpson, and there's so many people, we couldn't even get out, you know, and it was a night flight or an evening flight, and it was pitch dark, and you couldn't find it. No, I mean, it was pitch dark before you even got out of town. So I went from cornfield to cornfield looking for the silhouette of a Barnes balloon in the corn, and I kept saying, have you seen it? Look at the Irish. No, go to the next one, the next one. Oh, I looked for like an hour and a half, and this is before you had road relations or, so, and finally, the guy who he was riding or rode with him was sitting in the middle of the road waiting. I've been to every place. That was my worst one. So I want to thank you and we have a lot more memories. We could probably talk for another hour or so, but thank you very much for coming and over now.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Becky.
Thank you for the weekend, it's been
Thank you.
delightful.
And I really would like to just have a chit chat with you and on your transatlantic